Women are making society polygamous. The surprising consequences of female success. This is an interesting title because I don't know what female success. Well, maybe it's going to talk about money, how much money they make, and so because they make more money, they're just sleeping around. But I would have thought more because of birth control. But hey, I want to see his clickbait title and how his video relates to that. And I will then make my own clickbait title for this video. So, hey, to each their own. Get my little coffee in.
I'm Dr. Orion Taraban, and this is Psych Hacks, Better Living Through Psychology. And the topic of today's short talk is Women Are Making Society Polygamous. Now, this is obviously a very provocative title, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it isn't true. And I hope to back it up with some evidence and arguments in this episode.
Please, for the love of God, clean the spit off your lip, dude. Just lick your lips. Because that's all I'm staring at right now is he's got like a little spit on his lip there. And I just that's all I can see. Because I think it's spit or he's got chapped lips or something.
I will say at the outset that I don't think this movement is intentional. That is, I don't think that women are consciously attempting to accomplish this purpose. This is an epiphenomenon that emerges out of the data en masse. Kind of like how a wave emerges out of the movements of individual particles, none of which are particularly wave-like. None of the molecules has any awareness that it is contributing to the wave, but the wave arises out of the molecules nonetheless. This is the mystery surrounding individuals and populations. The two are obviously connected, but it's impossible to see how unless you take a wide enough vantage. And of course,
dude, I can't even hear what he's saying because I'm just staring at the thing. It's so distracting. Oh my God. Is anybody else bothered by this? All I can do is just stare at his lip, but he's talking about like waves and particles, and I'm like, what? I'm like, there's a particle on your lip, bro. I'm having a hard time, guys.
Before I lay out my arguments, please be sure to like this episode and subscribe to this channel. It takes less than a second, costs you nothing, and it's also a way for you to be a part of something much larger than yourself. So, do the thing. Now, to understand why this is happening, why women are making society polygamous, you have to first understand that women today are absolutely crushing it. While there was a gender gap that clearly favored men 50 years ago, we now have a gender gap that clearly favors women. And in many domains, the size of this gender gap is larger than the size of the gender gap that we had a half century ago.
What about the wage gap, bro? What about the wage gap? It's, 87 cents to the man's dollar?
Probably for the first time in human history, in most Western societies, childless women under 30 are earning more than childless men under 30. Women are graduating from high school, from college, from postgraduate institutions at a significantly higher rate than men. In fact, at a nearly 2-to-1 ratio.
Show your data, bro. Show your data. You don't just get to sit here and talk and not show your data. That's what I do. I just say shit. And then people are like, yeah, good job. You know what you're talking about.
They are doing very well. So hooray, women. That said, all this success does come with an unintended consequence with respect to the dating market. And before the women complain, well, who cares about dating? Let me just say that you should care about dating because unless you want to go back to your father choosing your husband for you, this is pretty much the only pathway to long-term relationships, marriage, and children.
I have a question. How many people think that he is single? His place is pretty nicely organized and stuff. He could just be really organized, but I feel like he might be married just for that reason.
Which are things I often hear women caring about. So problems with dating will have important downstream consequences. So what is the unintended consequence? In order to understand it, you first have to appreciate that women tend to date hypergamously. For those of you who have never heard this term before, hypergamy is the tendency to date across and up status hierarchies.
Yes, I can see he's tapped into the red pill. Yeah.
To put it simply, women want a man who is at least as good as her, if not better. And better, of course, is how women choose to define it, because
Well, hold on. Maybe he was going to go there, but what is better, right? Because don't people kind of look for different things? Like some women are thinking, I want a man with a certain height, certain amount of money, certain success in their life. Maybe it's a certain personality trait. Maybe it's a certain fitness build, right? Like better is such a broad term. If are we just talking about money and they're saying, hey, I make 100,000, so you better make more or same or more. So you better make like 120. You better make 100,000. Like, what are we saying here?
it's for the cat to decide which milk is good. However, with respect to some very obvious metrics, women tend to marry men who are older, taller, stronger, higher status, and higher earning. And here's the rub. If women are outperforming most men, and women continue to date hypergamously, then voila. You have an increasingly shrinking pool of men that the majority of women would even consider as candidates for dating.
Yeah, but I think, don't we all agree with that? Like, I feel in general, the people who probably watch my channel, and a lot of people, if you were to tell them this, would in general kind of agree with this. And that doesn't mean there's exceptions that certain people actually do date down, like certain women, because we know there's women like that out there, like we've seen them, but it's a minority of women, right? So the majority of women, yes, are dating the top 20% of men, essentially, and the rest are just like left with the scraps, the rest of the men.
And mating. And that's bad for women because fewer eligible men significantly increases the intra-sex competition for a dwindling pool of potential mates. And it's also bad for most men because most men are just flat out being disqualified from the sexual marketplace.
Correct.
On the other hand, if you are a top 10% man, a top 5% man, wow.
Like, how do you identify that? If we're just talking about, again, money. Like, what is top 10? What's top 5% or top 20%? Like, what is that? I know, like, we throw out all these terms like, oh, money or looks or whatever, but if you just take all these things and you wrap it together, are we saying that all women are the women who are dating are just looking, well, he's super handsome, he's super attractive, he's tall, he's fit, he makes a lot of money, he has a really good career, or runs a business or something. What are we saying? We say these things, but it's almost like we don't give the backstory to it as to what it actually means. Because it's very easy to say you're top 10 or you're top 5, and then you get these guys walking around like, I'm a top 5% man or top 1% man because I make 120,000 or whatever it is, right? And then you see their personalities and like who they are, and you're like, dude, you are not. You might make a lot of money, but your personality sucks. I don't know. That's where I'm stuck. I'm stuck at like, can we define it, or is it really very subjective and is based on every woman, which I would actually think it more likely is, because not every woman is the exact same. I know we like to think that. We're like, well, they want the money and they want this, but not every woman is like that.
Is it a time to be alive? And why is that? Because all of these beautiful, high-achieving, intelligent, successful women are competing for you, one of a smaller and smaller subset of men. And the men at the top of these status hierarchies are just having a lot of sex with a lot of different women, and this phenomenon is accelerating at a fantastic rate.
Okay, do we actually think that though, that these high-achieving women are the beautiful ones? When I think about high-achieving women that I've met, they're usually not beautiful. I'm sorry. Just what I've seen, I usually don't find them attractive. I find them like very masculine, kind of like really in their own thing. And that's not to say this is a generalization, right? There obviously are beautiful women that are high achieving.
In the last 10 years, the number of sexual partners that the average man has had has remained the same. However, over that time, according to the General Social Survey, the number of men under 30 who had no sex in the past 10 years, in the past year, has tripled from 10% to nearly 30%. This means that one in three young men have absolutely zero presence in the sexual marketplace. On the other hand, only roughly 1 in 6 women in that age group reported the same thing. This creates a correspondence of roughly 5 women for every 4 men.
Yeah, but we all know this, that women have an easier time to get sex because men will sleep with anybody, essentially. Or some men will sleep with anybody. Like some guys obviously have standards and things and won't do it, but usually men will sleep with women a lot easier. So I know we're comparing it, but it's kind of like, this is pretty normal. Like, it's not surprising.
And that assumes an even distribution across the remaining participants, which is absolutely not the case. The top performing men are not only having more sex with more women, they're having a lot more sex with a lot more women. So what does this mean? Well, if you put 2 and 2 together, it means that society is becoming increasingly polygamous.
Sure. Is that something that we should really be like, yeah, good job, guys? Is that what's really fulfilling? And is that really what you want? Or do you just want to find a good woman who, like one woman, right, who you're going to marry and have sex with, whatever, but she's going to be like your best friend. You guys are going to have like a great match. Because that's what I'm looking for. I don't need to sleep with like 10, 15, 20 different women in a year. Like, sure, there is something interesting about seeing beautiful women and their different bodies and things and be like, cool, it's kind of like exciting, but it's not fulfilling. It's not actually fulfilling to me internally.
In which a smaller and smaller subset of men are enjoying a larger share of the sexual access to all women. To put that 5-to-4 ratio another way, this means that 20% of women under 30 are currently in a polygamous relationship, whether they're aware of it or not.
Well, you say polygamous, but they're not dating, right? Like they could just be sleeping with a bunch of people. They're not calling it polygamous. You're just saying it's polygamous. Because they're not sitting there like, I'm with this guy and he told me we're going to be in a polygamous relationship, or I told him we're going to be in a polygamous relationship, and that's what they're doing. They're just not in a serious committed relationship, so they're just playing the field.
This situation is not conscious or intentional, but the data back it up. And just to be clear, this is not something men are doing. This is not something that men are forcing on women. Why? Well, in the first place, you have to remember that more men are getting less sex than they had 10 years ago. So if this is a conspiracy on the part of men, they're doing a really bad job of it. And in the second place, women are gatekeepers of sex. These women are not having sex with a smaller subset of men against their will. It's the women who are functionally voting with their feet that it's either these men or no men at all for me, thanks. And what's the likelihood that any one of these top men who now have historically unprecedented sexual access to women, what's the likelihood that one of these top men is going to exclusively commit to any one of these women?
This is a good point, what he's making. If they have a bunch of options available to them, and if you're a man who doesn't have that inner calling to be like, hey, like I would really like to have a committed, solid relationship with somebody, that's what I want in life, then yeah, you could just sit there and play the field, and these women are going to be pissed off because maybe they don't want to have that polygamous type relationship. They want to settle down with somebody. True. Yeah. But that's why we see all these videos from different women being like, how come there's no good men? All these men are shitty. Because they're going with guys in some cases, right? Where these men are just playing the field because they got tons of options, and that's who you're attracted to. And I think a lot of this has to do with, personally, with online dating. I think if you do some type of dating where you actually meet somebody in person, it's a lot better because you actually get to portray your personality, and it's more than just looking at a photo and a profile that nobody reads, and they read the first line and they're like swipe. So if you can do something where you meet people in person, whether it's joining a group or like speed dating or some kind of dating service or something like that, or meeting through friends or communities, community groups or something would be ideal. Yeah, you get to sort of meet the person. And in some of those situations, you can actually be friends first, and then you build a connection, and then it's much easier to get into the relationship.
I would say that it becomes increasingly smaller. So, this is one of the unintended consequences of women's recent success. And what are the solutions? Well, we know that there are several bad or unlikely ones, including reactionary social movements that relegate women to traditional gender roles, or asking women to date and mate with men who are less desirable to them.
We say less desirable, but again, going back to my previous point, how do you know they're less desirable? Because you haven't spent any time with them, right? So if like somebody rejects you on an online dating app just based on your photo and I don't know, whatever your job title is, that's like you don't know anything about that person. Just they look like this and they're a carpenter or whatever they are. And you're just like, no, it's like you're not really rejecting that person. You're just rejecting some fictitious idea that you assumed based on how they look and what their job title is. This is why meeting in person is better.
I mean, neither of those things is going to happen. So, to be honest, the best solution that I can come up with is to really support men. Like to support men with at least as much vigor and enthusiasm as we currently support women. So that the pool of desirable men continues to grow rather than shrink for many years to come.
I think that's a decent point, but then it doesn't just become like a competition where it's like women are doing really well and then men are doing really well, so maybe I guess you end up at like a 50-50. There's still a bunch of men left out. Like you're never going to end up in a place where all men are above the hypergamous nature that he's mentioning here that women have. Either way, there's going to be people left out. I don't know if there's an answer to not have people left out. Okay, well, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Please let me know your thoughts down below. This was kind of an interesting one. He did not clean his lip the whole time. I managed to get past it. I was just staring at his eyes. I was like, all right, focus on his face, focus on his eyes. Please like and subscribe. Thanks for watching, guys, and we will see you next time.